Coming up next on this special edition of Arizona Horizon, U.S. Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego join us in studio to discuss a variety of issues ranging from turmoil at the Defense Department, volatility on Wall Street, and threats to Medicaid. One-on-one interviews with Arizona's two U.S. Senators next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Tonight, Arizona Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego join us in studio to discuss the issues of the day, and there is no shortage of issues facing the country. We begin by welcoming Senator Mark Kelly to Arizona Horizon. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Ted.
Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
You betcha. I'm trying to get a measure. We're far away here, and we see the headlines. We report on the headlines, but we're across the country. Is it as chaotic as it seems inside the Beltway?
I think it's a lot different than it was during my first 4 years in the United States Senate. We've got a new administration since January 20th. We're less than 100 days in. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of uncertainty, economic uncertainty, uncertainty with our relationships with other countries, Canada, our European allies, even uncertainty with our relationships with adversaries. But I really worry about the relationships that we have spent decades building across the globe and how this administration, the Trump administration, has treated our friends.
Yeah, and in bright lights is the war in Ukraine. And today, speaking of issues of the day, Ukraine basically said no to the U.S. proposal to end the war. That U.S. proposal, correct me if I'm wrong, that seems like it's the Russian proposal, is it not?
Well, that's what happens when you give up leverage before the negotiations started. And if you go back a couple months when President Zelensky met in the Oval Office with President Trump, with the Vice President, Secretary of State, that was a time where they gave up two big, really sticking points there, and it was NATO membership and land, essentially, and Crimea was part of it. Mm-hmm. Crimea was traditionally part of Ukraine, and all that Donbass and Luhansk territory, that is part of Ukraine. Those two negotiating points were given up before the negotiations started. So at this point, the administration is kind of leaning on the side of what the Russian plan for a ceasefire is. That is not in our best interest as a country. We cannot come out of this where Vladimir Putin, who is now a war criminal, where Vladimir Putin thinks that this was a good idea to invade Ukraine.
And yet, that position was very strong among Republicans and GOP circles for years. It is not strong now. What happened?
Well, it shows the influence of this president on the Republican Party. And right now, he's very effective at getting Republicans in the House and Senate to get in line. What we need to get this back on track is for my Republican colleagues, especially in the Senate, to get off the sidelines, to get out of that line. Don't fall in line behind the president. Fall in line behind what is right for our country and our national security and the national security of our allies.
Are you hearing from your Republican fellow senators there, are you hearing behind the scenes, under the microphones, that sentiment, but they're afraid to say something? We heard Elisa Murkowski, I believe we heard her basically say that she's afraid, and other Republicans are afraid. You hearing that?
Yes. I mean, you hear different things in private than you see in public. I think that's true for everybody in this business. They're in a challenging position. But what I think what they need to be doing is thinking long-term and big picture. Donald Trump is not going to be on the scene forever. He's got limited time in this term. He talks about a third term in office. That's not a realistic thing for him. I think he says this just to get controversy out there. They need to think about what's in the best interest of our nation next year, next decade, over the decades to come. And the policies, especially with regards to our national security and our relationship with other allies, is that the Trump administration, in my view, is flawed.
Okay, what happens if the U.S. abandons Ukraine?
Well, I think we'll see how much the Europeans can step in to support them. They certainly can do more. I think they will do more. But without our support, without our leadership, without us rallying our allies in support of this ally, Ukraine, ultimately, I think the chance of Russia being successful is much, much higher without our support.
And last question on this. Why does it seem as though the president constantly and repeatedly and consistently leans toward Russia, not just on this issue, but in other issues? What's going on there?
Well, Ted, I think that's the big question. And I think that's something that maybe we'll never know. But he does seem to have this affinity for Vladimir Putin in a way that I just don't understand. You know, Putin is a dictator. He's an authoritarian. He's a murderer. And he is always going to make decisions that are not in the best interests of the United States and our allies. I wish the president would understand that. He does not seem to.
All this as the Defense Department, the U.S. Defense Department, appears to be in turmoil. Your thoughts on what's happening there? Secretary of Defense, goodness gracious, these signal chats, all of this, the whole 9 yards. What are your thoughts?
Well, right before his confirmation vote, where it was unclear whether he had the votes or not, I said to my Republican colleagues, I said, are you sure? Are you sure you want to put this guy in this job? This is one of the most complicated jobs on the planet. And no offense, Ted, to journalists and journalism. You guys play a very important role. But 9 years as a Saturday morning host on Fox News does not prepare you to run one of the most complicated enterprises in the world with millions of employees and hundreds of billions of dollars and $850 billion budget. He is ill-equipped, and he has proven that over the last 3 months.
And yet we're hearing from Republicans on Capitol Hill that this is a media creation here, that the strikes in Yemen, which the signal chants we're talking about here, the strikes in Yemen were successful, that morale in the military is up, and that recruitment is up. And those are things that we as journalists should be concentrating on.
Well, let's talk about those strikes. So I used to fly strikes off of an aircraft carrier. The first Gulf War, I flew 39 combat missions over Iraq and Kuwait. There was no world where it would have ever occurred to me that the Secretary of Defense was going to let people know on an unsecured system what my launch time was, what my time on target was, what platform I was flying, what weapon systems were going to be deployed on that strike. That is not something anybody would ever expect to happen. They say this was not classified information, or it's not a war plan. Mm-hmm. This is the most sensitive information we have. When are we sending troops over the beach? When are we sending them on a mission? There is nothing that we try to keep more closely held than that. And he put it on an unsecured system. He did it more than once. He did it with people that did not have security clearances. I don't believe his wife has a security clearance. Who did she then share this information with? In this case, we got lucky. We really got lucky that information did not leak to the Russians or was accessed off of somebody's phone, their personal phone, from the Russians, got transmitted to the Iranians, and then to the Houthis. Sure, the mission was a success. Give that credit to the United States Navy, to those pilots. But those pilots, that mission was riskier because of the actions of the Secretary of Defense, and he should resign because he is not prepared to do this job.
All that being said, the president apparently and reportedly likes Secretary Hegseth's pluck. He likes the fact that he's changing things. He likes the fact that he's rearranging what some see as a bloated and ineffective military.
I think what he really likes is the guy's good on TV. That's why he hired him. He spent a lot of time on TV. You see this in this administration. A lot of the top folks have some connection, whether it's Dr. Oz or others. They have a background in media. They do not have, in many cases, they do not have the necessary leadership skills and the background to do the jobs that they're assigned.
What are you hearing in military circles about all this?
Well, it's rather chaotic at the Defense Department because of the person who's in charge. And we see General Hawk as an example, the head of the NSA, incredibly qualified guy who had strong bipartisan support, was just fired because an internet troll comes into the Oval Office and says you should fire this guy. The head of Cyber Command and the National Security Agency gets fired because of some civilian who doesn't seem to like some things that he has done in his past. He was an incredibly effective leader.
But again, my question is, obviously you see this a certain way, and others see this a certain way, no doubt in the military. But the military as a whole, do they agree with you, or do they see this as, show me the mission, I'll get the job done, doesn't matter who the Secretary of Defense is?
Well, I think it matters who the Secretary of Defense is to members of the military. They need to have confidence in the person's leadership. And I'm not saying everybody has lost confidence in him. You know, folks in the military, they're real people, right? They vote, they've got political opinions. He certainly does still have supporters in the military. But I'll tell you this, there are now Republicans in the United States Congress that are calling for him to resign or be fired.
Yes, interesting. Tariffs, again, news of the day. The president seems to be backing off a little bit as far as the tariffs against China. This is a whiplash policy, economic policy at best, and yet supporters of the president will say there's a reason for that. This is his way of negotiating a deal, and other countries are stepping up and they're ready to make a deal. What say you?
Well, he just negotiated millions of Americans out of trillions of dollars. He destroyed a significant amount of wealth that was in our economy that just evaporated because he doesn't have a good plan. His tariff plan comes from Peter Navarro because Peter Navarro wrote a book, has a made-up economist in the book. I can't find any economists or respected business leaders that say that Donald Trump's tariff plan is a good plan that's going to help our economy. And so far, all it has done is a lot of damage. Now, I support targeted tariffs when they make sense to solve specific problems. That's not this. And on top of it, he's changing his mind almost daily. 145% on China, 25% on Mexico. No, we'll make it 10%. Now we'll suspend it for 10 days. Now we'll suspend it for 90 days. Tariffs back on, it's back off. If you're a business leader, I was at a company called Benchmark today that makes a lot of components for our defense and aerospace industry. That's their biggest concern, is that this is so unpredictable. The same thing down in Nogales on Monday. They can't plan. They can't decide what they're going to charge their customer when they don't know if the tariff is going to be 20% or 145%, or if it's going to be suspended for another 90 days, or it's going to go away completely.
Last question, real quickly. For those of us here in Arizona watching, seeing all of this unfolding in Washington, what is your message?
Get involved. I mean, these things matter. They matter to you. Tariffs are going to raise costs for your family. Prices are going to go up unless these tariffs go away. Encourage the president to get rid of them, to start over again, and have real trade negotiations with our allies and with countries that we typically think of our adversaries, but are also big trading partners. Have real negotiations. Don't kind of randomly, throw tariffs at 100-something countries. We've never done anything like this before. And if you look back in history, it's really easy to put tariffs on. It's a lot harder to get them to come off. And tariffs are paid by the American people, by taxpayers. I don't care what the president says that this foreign country is paying these tariffs. That is not true. They are paid here in the United States, and the cost gets passed on to the American consumer. So get involved, speak out.
Senator Mark Kelly, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted.
Earlier today, Senator Ruben Gallego joined us in studio. Senator Gallego, good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ted.
I'm curious. From a distance, it looks like mayhem back in Washington. What is the mood on Capitol Hill?
Well, look, I think legitimately there is mayhem, largely being caused by this administration. I think there is a want for bipartisanship. For certainly some of us in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, we want to get working together in a manner that will benefit this country in the short term and long term. But what's happening at the administration really kind of disrupts all of that. And really causes the chaos that you're seeing on TV and what people are feeling every day.
We're hearing some on the left saying Democrats in Congress on Capitol Hill not fighting back hard enough against the Trump administration. What's your response to that?
Look, I think the Democrats on the House and the Senate have been fighting at the level that we need to be at every step. Now, I think a lot of our compatriots wanted us to fight from day one. The sentiment of the American public and of Arizonans, who I have to answer to more so than a party, was that they wanted us to give an opportunity to this presidency to see if there was some compromises, places that we could work together. And we did do that. And now we've seen, of course, that the president is outstripping the feelings and sentiments of the public, and we're fighting him at an appropriate place and time.
I want to get to some particular issues. Let's start with Medicaid, and because this has a lot of folks here in Arizona worried that
They should be worried, yeah.
This budget that looks for $880 billion in cuts,
Yeah.
and Medicaid, Medicare almost can't be avoided there. What do you say to people that are worried about Medicaid in Arizona, access in Arizona?
Well, they should be worried. Look, the bill that they passed said that the E&C committee has to cut $880 billion from their committee. The only way that you do that is for Medicare and Medicaid. I'm hoping they're smart enough to not touch Medicare, because that is the third rail of politics. But also, Medicaid now is also, in my opinion, too. I've been traveling the state, specifically actually having town halls in rural Arizona, in what people would call red Arizona. And rural Arizona is more dependent on Medicaid than urban Arizona, than Maricopa County and Pima County. 30% of the residents of rural Arizona are on Medicaid. The hospital systems are entirely dependent on Medicaid expansion. So when they go and they cut those $880 billion, you're directly affecting some of the poorest of this country and of this state. You will shut down rural hospitals, and all in the cause of just giving a bigger tax cut to the uber rich of this country.
Is that message getting through to red Arizona?
I actually do think it is getting through, whether it was in Douglas or it's been in Sierra Vista or it's been in northern Arizona that I've been talking to. We've heard of Republicans that are very concerned. You start seeing the polling where Republicans are polled and saying that they do not want to see Medicaid cuts in exchange for more tax cuts. You're seeing Republicans in the House and the Senate communicating to their leadership that they don't want to see massive tax cuts on the backs of Medicaid cuts. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they won't try to do any backdoor cuts to Medicaid, which will still affect hundreds of thousands of Arizonans. But at a minimum, at least, you could see that they have a fear that if they go after Medicaid, that there will be political consequences to them.
And yet the Trump administration, the president himself said, Medicare, Medicaid, not on the chopping block. Don't worry about it, they say. Should we be worried about it?
Well, yes, if he's saying that, absolutely, because the one consistency about Donald Trump is his inconsistency. So we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get the message out that this is a real humanitarian crisis, that you will be kicking off hundreds of thousands of Arizonans, hospitals will be shutting down, people are losing their jobs. All these things are going to happen. And more importantly, Ted, this is an option. An option. The president and Republicans can extend the tax cuts further without cutting Medicaid. Now, you'll have to give up maybe giving the top earners a tax cut, but you could still contain the middle class tax cuts, as well as even hold where the corporate tax cuts are now. But you can't do that if you want to go further and deeper and giving tax cuts to the ultra rich. The only way they do that is by going after Medicaid.
Speaking of the ultra rich and speaking of those connected, you want an ethics probe into possible insider trading on Wall Street, especially with the volatility of what we have been seeing of late. What's that all about?
Well, it's very simple. The elites of this country, sometimes you could see that they are getting inside information, or seem like they're trading on inside information. And leading up to the tariff pause that the president announced, only a few minutes before he announced it, there was a huge spike in buys of stocks, specifically stocks would benefit from a pause on tariffs. Clearly somebody knew something was happening, and they were able to take advantage of that situation and actually told other friends. Now, I'm not saying the president did it on purpose either, But I do think that just looking at the data, it does demand that we have an investigation, because it's not fair to the American consumer and your everyday stockholder if they have to compete against people that have insider information. And this is why it's also important that we in the Senate, which I've always been an advocate of, even in the House, we need to also pass legislation that stops members of Congress from buying individual stocks and trading individual stocks, knowingly with a lot of the information that we have.
Okay, you want an investigation. There's smoke over there, but is there fire? Is there evidence of insider trading?
Well, the data shows that there was such an abnormal spike in trading right before the announcement happens that there's definitely enough smoke. Now, I don't want to go and say that this is something that someone needs to be prosecuted for it, but clearly, if this had been done in any other markets, if this had been done among insiders of the New York Stock Exchange, there would be an investigation. So there should be an investigation to see what happened here, if anything was involved, and then after that, proceed accordingly. And if there's nothing there and there just happens to be a glitch, then fine. But there's no way that the abnormal amount of trades that happened minutes before the announcement, it should not go uninvestigated.
Are you confident in the SEC to do such an investigation, considering downsizing and everything else that's going on with agencies back in Washington?
It's not necessarily that I'm confident, but I do believe that some of this data, when exposed, does not necessarily need a deep investigation. It's fairly straightforward. And these are regulated markets that have pretty good tracing. So we know when things are bought, how often they're bought, and at that point we could also trace who received information. So, and lastly, I think the American public will actually end up making this determination at the end of the day. But at least having that information public will allow us to actually understand what actually happened minutes before this announcement.
I know you've commented on this as well. VA employees, mass layoffs, plans for maybe 80,000, more cuts to the VA likely inevitable. I know you're against that kind of thing. What can you do about it?
Well, a couple of things like within my power. For example, I'm holding all VA political appointees hostage, essentially, until we get a real plan from this VA administrator that shows us where these cuts are, and you have to prove that these cuts are not going to affect services. It's in my opinion, not just as a congressman, as a senator, but someone who actually has used the VA. As a young man, when I returned from the Iraq War, the VA fixed this knee. It's all titanium, good old American product right there. I've used them for my PTSD services and other medical services. I have friends that still use it to this day. For the longest time, we've been complaining about the lack of staffing at the VA, the need to actually recruit some of the best and top specialists and doctors. Doing this is only going to turn that clock backwards. It's going to make it harder for us to actually recruit people going into the future. And right now we have enrollment dropping in the VA, largely because we have men and women that served in the World War II and the Korean War that are now dying. But because a lot of us younger veterans are starting to get older, you're going to see the enrollment increase in the VA. And if we don't have the staff to match the demand, you're going to have wait times. You're going to have people not being able to get the surgeries they need, the services that they want. We're hearing already of horrible situations where men and women have to do their PTSD therapy in open air cubicles, which is awful to do, all because this administration is more hell-bent on these cuts, but not necessarily on figuring out how to make good quality improvements because they're just obsessed with a 15% cut that doesn't actually make any sense numerically to the services that are needed. And
I would ask again how that information gets out there, but we're kind of running short on time a little bit. And I do want to ask you about the Democratic Party. There's a feeling that the party is still reeling after this last election, that the party was abandoned by the working class. You did a very prominent interview in the New York Times a couple of months ago, basically saying that the party seemed like it was on this rail and the American public was on this rail. What's going on out there as far as the party is concerned, especially in light with what's happening with Republicans and at the White House?
Well, look, there's no denying that we had a total mismatch in terms of message and policy and the voter, and the working class voter. I think now we have a perfect opportunity. I think the American public gave an opportunity to this administration, and they're seeing in a horrible manner quite quickly that what was offered and what was promised is not actually going to occur. We're seeing right now inflation is higher. The economic forecast shows a recession is coming. interest rates are not getting any lower. And so the promise of where President Trump had promised that he was going to change it all is not there. And so what he did in the first really 100 days is he focused on the richest of the rich and at the same time cutting the poorest of the poor when it comes to Medicaid. That is unpopular with the working class of this country. And this is where the Democratic Party has to really shine. We have to show that we're willing to fight for Main Street, fight for the working class, protect Medicaid, protect veterans, especially when these cuts are all designed just to find more money to give a tax cut to the richest of the rich. That's how we win.
And again, that question, I think you've answered this to some extent, but again, the idea of a promise among Democrats, more than we're not him, we're not them. Is that promise there, and is that promise connecting, or is there still a disconnect with much of America?
I think there is still a disconnect because we're still not prominently within the election season. But showing, number one, that our fight is their fight, showing that we're willing to throw down the gauntlet to protect Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, to fight for Main Street, to make sure that they are going to survive the volatility of these crazy tariff wars, to make sure that people are going to have real wage growth and be able to have buying power. That's how we win this. Now, when we start getting into the next year, we have to put together a real policy agenda, which I think is going to be incumbent, that is a strong statement that says that Americans can have a bright future in this country. They're going to be able to buy a home, start a business, have secure retirement, and have a secure neighborhood. When we put that out there, that's how we're going to win. If we try to have an amorphous anti-Trump message, we are going to lose, because that message, the Trump message, is always stronger than the nebulous anti-Trump message.
Interesting. And real quickly, you talked in the New York Times interview and in other interviews as well about Latinos and males especially, and the goals, the dreams therein.
Yeah.
That Democratic promise that you just talked about, does that resonate with that cohort?
It does, but we have to make sure that we back it up with real words and real policies, right? And when we don't do that, that's when we start losing votes. Look, if you've already seen this, the opinion of Latino voters of the president has turned. There was just a Pew poll that just came out where the president's numbers are so underwater. He's only at around 28% favorability with Latinos. And that's because Latinos look at what he's done and you disagree with him in two fronts. Number one, the fact that he hasn't done anything in terms of changing the economy, specifically the ability for them to be able to buy and attain the American dream. And number two, his overshooting when it comes to immigration policies.
All right, Senator Ruben Gallego, I could talk to you all afternoon. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks for having me.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of Arizona Horizon. You have a great evening.